My stove is still warm 12 hours after the fire goes out, and I have not put a stick of wood in it since 9 o'clock last night. It is 7:15 in the morning here in Norway. The window over the sink has frost on the inside corner, and I have just put my palm flat on the side of that stove the way I do every morning. It is warm, not hot. Warm the way a stone wall is warm at the end of a summer day. There is no fire in it. There has not been a flame in that firebox since before I went to bed. If I open the little cast iron door, there is nothing in there but grey ash and one blackened end of birch that did not quite finish. The stove is a column of grey-green stone about as tall as my chest, quarried out of a mountain about 180 miles north of here. It weighs somewhere over 800 pounds. 2 men and a hand truck put it in this room in 1986, and it has not moved since, and it will not move until somebody takes this house apart. Now here is what that means at 7 in the morning in February. I do not come down to a cold house. I do not stand in a bathrobe in front of a steel stove, holding a match to a wad of newspaper with my breath showing. The room is 66 degrees. It has been between 64 and 72 all night without anyone tending anything. And the only thing I do before the coffee is open the damper and lay 2 pieces of birch in on the ash. An American who heats with wood knows the other version of this morning intimately. The steel stove gets you to 80 degrees in the room while it is running, and it is stone cold 2 hours after the last log has burned down. So you feed it at 10, and you feed it at 1 if you wake, and you feed it at 4, and if you sleep through, you come down to 52 degrees and start over. The wood stove owns your night. The difference between those 2 mornings is not the wood, and it is not the chimney, and it is not the size of the fire. It is what the fire was allowed to do with its heat on the way out of the house. My father heated with an iron stove and got up twice a night to do it for 40 years. When I put this one in, he came and stood in the room with his hand on it for a long time and said only that it was a lot of money for a rock. Then he came for Christmas and slept in this room and did not get up once, and he never said anything about it again, which from him was a review.
A wood fire produces an enormous amount of heat in a very short time, and then it stops. That is the entire problem with heating a house by burning things, and every stove ever built is an answer to it. The steel stove answers it by giving the heat to the room as fast as it is made. Thin metal, hot surface, hot air rising off it, and a room that warms in 20 minutes. It is also why the room is cold 2 hours after the fire dies. There is nothing in a steel stove to hold anything. The stove and the fire live and die together. The stone stove answers it by refusing to hand the heat over. You burn a hot, fast, clean fire, and instead of that heat going up the flue or straight into the room, most of it goes into 800 pounds of rock. The stone soaks it up over an hour or 2 and gets thoroughly hot all the way through. And then it spends the next 12 hours giving it back at a rate you cannot change and do not need to. Soapstone is unusually good at this. It is a dense, soft, talc-heavy stone. It holds a great deal of heat for its size, and it survives being taken from cold to blazing and back again thousands of times without cracking, which is a harder trick than it sounds, and is where most ordinary stone fails. The second difference is the kind of heat you get, and it is the part nobody warns you about until they have lived with it. A steel stove heats the air. The air rises to the ceiling, the floor stays cold, you get a hot spot 6 feet from the stove and a cold room 15 feet away, and every time the door opens, the warmth leaves with the air. A stone mass at 140 degrees does not heat the air much at all. It radiates, the way the sun does through a window in March. What it warms is you, and the floor, and the walls, and the furniture, directly. The room does not stratify, the corners are not cold, and because the objects in the room are warm rather than just the air, 66 degrees feels like something a good deal warmer than 66 degrees does in a house with a furnace. That last point is the one that shows up on a bill. A person sitting in a room full of warm surfaces is comfortable at a lower air temperature than a person sitting in warm air in a cold box. The arithmetic is worth doing once, roughly, because it makes the whole thing concrete. Soapstone holds somewhere around 1/5 of a unit of heat per pound for every degree you raise it. Take 800 pounds of it up 400 degrees over the course of a hard 2-hour fire, and you have parked something on the order of 70,000 units of heat in the middle of your kitchen. That is a tank. And a tank does not care what time it is or whether anyone is awake. There is a third thing, and it belongs to a man my age. A steel stove has a surface that will take the skin off a hand at 400 degrees. Mine runs somewhere around 140 at the sides. My grandson leans on it to put his boots on. The stone in my kitchen has a longer record in this country than almost anything else you could name, and that record is why I trust it more than I trust a brochure. Soapstone has been quarried in Norway since the Stone Age. It was cut into axes and net weights and loom weights, and then into cooking pots, and the Vikings carried it in their boats because a soapstone pot could sit directly in a fire without shattering, which a clay one could not. Then it went into the churches. Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim, begun around 1070 and substantially finished by 1300, is built of it. 230 years of construction, the northernmost medieval cathedral in the world, and it stands up out of the ground in that same grey-green stone. There has been a restoration workshop attached to that building continuously since 1869, cutting replacement stone by hand, and the men in that workshop are still arguing about which quarry gives the right match. The stove came later, and it came from the same instinct. By the end of the 1600s, they were making soapstone hards up in the Gudbrandsdalen Valley. By the end of the 1800s, there were several firms at Otter making stoves and fireplaces out of it, and otter stone went into houses all over this country. The company that consolidated most of that business 100 years ago is still making stoves at Otter today. So when I tell you that 800 pounds of rock will hold heat overnight, I am not repeating a claim from a catalogue. I am telling you that this country worked out the properties of this particular stone somewhere around the time it worked out iron, put it in its cathedral, and has been selling stoves cut from it for 130 years to people who would notice immediately if they did not work. The idea itself is older and wider than Norway, and I will not pretend otherwise. Northern Europe and Russia have been building heavy masonry heaters for centuries. The Finns and the Austrians and the Germans each have their own version, and the Chinese were sleeping on heated masonry platforms long before any of us. Norway's contribution was not the principle, it was the quarry. What is worth taking from all of it is the shape of the idea, which is very old and very simple. Do not try to make heat slowly. Make it fast and hot and clean, and then own something heavy enough to keep it.
Running a mass stove is close to the opposite of running a steel one, and people who switch get it wrong for a whole first winter. You burn hot, and you burn fast, and you let it go out. Twice a day. A full load of dry wood, the air wide open, a hard, bright fire that roars for an hour and a half or 2 hours and consumes itself completely. Then you close the damper and you walk away, and you do not touch it again until evening. The fire is not the heating. The fire is the charging. The thing you must never do is what every steel stove owner learns to do. Choke the air down to make one load last all night. A smoldering fire at low air is a dirty fire. It burns at a low temperature. It does not consume its own smoke, and everything it fails to burn condenses in your chimney as creosote. On a mass stove, you are also throwing away the entire point, because a smoldering fire never gets the stone hot in the first place. So the rule is, hot fire, wide open, all the way to ash. If your stove has a bypass damper for lighting, use it and then close it once the flue is drawing well. And that is the only fiddling required. 2 burns a day is the rhythm in this house from November to March. Morning around 7, evening around 8.
In the shoulder months, I burn once a day or not at all, because on a 45-degree afternoon, this stove will overheat the room, and there is no way to take it back. That is a real limitation, and I will come back to it. Dry wood only, and I mean genuinely dry. Wet wood spends the first half of the fire boiling water instead of heating stone, and on a mass stove you feel that the next morning at 5 in a way you never would on a steel one. Do not put a fan on it. People buy those little stove-top fans and set them on a mass heater and wonder why it does nothing. There is not enough surface heat to drive one, and blowing air across the stone is working directly against the radiant heat you paid for. Leave the ash. An inch or two of ash on the floor of the firebox is not neglect. It is insulation, and it helps the next fire come up to temperature faster instead of dumping its first half hour into cold masonry. Shovel it out when it reaches the bottom of the door opening and not before, and put it in a metal bucket with a lid outside, because ash holds live coals for days longer than anyone believes. And have the chimney swept every year by somebody who does it for a living. In this country, the sweep is a municipal service, and he comes whether you call him or not, which I understand is not how it works where you are. A hot, clean fire makes far less creosote than a smoldering one, but far less is not none. And learn the surface with your hand. After one winter, you will be able to touch the side of it in the morning and know, within an hour, how long ago the fire went out and whether tonight needs 1 load or 2. That is not mysticism. It is the only gauge the thing has, and it is a very good one.
This is the most expensive thing I have ever recommended, and for a lot of people watching this, the correct answer is no. Start with the money. A soapstone-clad wood stove runs roughly $3,000 to $6,000 in the United States before installation. A true masonry heater, built on site by a mason, runs $8,000 to $20,000 and up, plus the chimney. Installation, permits, and hearthwork are on top of that. There is no version of this that pays for itself quickly, and anyone showing you a chart where it does has picked their fuel prices carefully. Then the weight, which is the thing people discover too late. 800 pounds concentrated on a few square feet will need the floor checked, and a real masonry heater at 4,000 to 8,000 pounds needs its own footing down to the foundation, which usually means it goes in when the house is built or during a serious renovation. This is not a weekend purchase you have delivered. The manufacturers advertise 12, 14, sometimes 18 hours of heat, and those figures come from the people selling the stoves. Under good conditions with dry wood and a warm house, 12 hours is real, and I live it. In a badly insulated house in a hard wind, you will get less, and no stone will fix a leaky building. Sealing the house comes before buying the stove, always, and it costs a fraction as much. The slowness cuts both ways, and this is the honest drawback nobody selling one mentions. A mass stove takes hours to come up and hours to come down. If you come home to a cold house on a Friday night, you will not be warm for a long while. If the weather turns mild, you cannot turn it down, and for a house that sits empty for weeks in the winter, it is close to useless. Check your local rules before you spend $1. Wood-burning appliances are regulated in much of the United States, and a fair number of counties have burn bans on poor air quality days, and some jurisdictions restrict new installations outright. Your air quality district and your insurer both have opinions, and be honest with yourself about time. If you might sell this house in 5 years, you will not get that money back at closing, whatever anyone tells you. My stove made sense because my father slept in this room and my grandson will. That was the calculation, and it was not a financial one. The rest of us can have most of the physics for very little money, which is where I want to leave you, because the principle is worth more than the appliance. The idea is mass near the heat. You can buy that in pieces. If you already own a steel wood stove, set fire brick on top of it and along the back of the hearth behind it.
Standard fire brick runs $2 to $4 a piece at a masonry supply or a big box hardware store. 20 of them is under $80, and they will hold heat for 2 to 3 hours after the fire dies and take the edge off the temperature swing. Leave clearance around the flue collar and do not block any air path the manufacturer built in. A soapstone slab or a set of soapstone tiles laid on a stovetop does the same job and looks like something. $50 to $150 depending on size. Put a cast iron kettle full of water on the stove, $10 to $40. 8 pounds of water is real thermal mass. It evens out the swing and it puts moisture back into a room that a wood fire is drying out. There is no mystery in it, and it works. Look at your floor. A tile or stone or brick hearth extending 3 or 4 feet out in front of a stove is not only a code requirement, it is a heat battery that sits in the sun of the fire all evening and gives it back to your feet at midnight. If yours is a small steel plate, extending it is a genuine improvement and a job a competent handyman can do. Do the cheap building work first. Weather stripping, attic insulation, and sealing the obvious leaks will do more for how your house holds heat overnight than any stove will at 1/100th of the price. A stone stove in a leaky house is a beautiful, expensive way to heat the outdoors, and if you are genuinely at the point of replacing a wood stove, then ask the dealer for the soapstone-lined models, and ask 2 specific questions. How many pounds does it weigh, and what does the manufacturer claim for heat output 6 hours after the fire is out? The weight answer tells you more than the brochure does. That stove has been in this room for 40 years. It has warmed my wife, my father in his last winter, 2 dogs, and every neighbor who has ever come through the door in bad weather and been handed a cup of something. Nobody has ever asked me what it cost. A fire lasts 2 hours. Stone lasts as long as you leave it alone.